Hello again. Making a figuring out my fears video. I had kind of forgotten about this because I stopped logging it in the journal, but lucky for me, I guess not lucky, I did this beforehand very willingly. Um, Good for me that I planned this out beforehand and put it down on a put down a specific day on the calendar to do this. So, while I still have a couple of these on backlog, may as well get these out and sort of just make sure I actually put down scheduled dates for when I should make these videos. What I'm going to be covering today is a fear of consequence, which I have a feeling is something that most people have, especially in, well, the current system we have. It seems like no matter who you are, you're always pining to get out of the consequences for your actions. Not as if all consequences are bad, though. Because they really aren't. Consequence could kind of be stretched to really just the reaction of things to the actions that you take. There's a sort of gray area here. In a sense, I'm talking about bad consequence. You know, the negative stuff that you kind of associate with the word, based based just initially off of most people's understanding of consequence. Bit of an important clarification here, especially since I myself don't necessarily see consequence as an entirely bad thing. Not all consequences are bad, some are quite good, even if you could interpret them as bad. It's, for me at least, it's a rather gray term that just kind of doesn't really have one set meaning. I don't know how much of a truth that is for other people, but for me in particular, I don't see consequences as exclusively bad. I think consequence is just kind of a universal thing that happens whenever you do something. Particularly when talking about a fear of consequence, though, it's not that I have a fear of things reacting to what I do, or or my actions actually having an effect, but rather I fear my actions having a negative effect. So, important distinction out of the way. What exactly is let's see. It's been a bit. The effects. Okay. The effects of my fear of consequence typically is a loss of passion, motivation, really just sloth, not wanting to do anything. Is sort of kind of how I am at the moment, I guess. Big quotes, I am still doing something, it's just I'm not doing as much as I wish I was. And that is mostly because of a fear of consequence. Why have I stopped? Why did I stop drawing when I enjoyed it so much? Well, one, I was fearing that I wasn't going too far, and two, I was kind of scared that I'd meet a negative reception, both from myself and from others. It was, I'd say that's definitely the main reason. I didn't want a negative reception from others, and so I just kind of stopped doing something I liked. It doesn't, to clarify, this doesn't always happen, but at the same time, sometimes those consequences aren't nearly as cataclysmic. If I had, it really depends on the consequences. For something like a video game, it's very easy to get back up and sort of just keep going. Whereas, well, something like drawing, writing, really a lot of creative ventures, you kind of have to put in a lot of work and a lot of practice. And there's a sort of, at least in my mind, there's a sort of negative connotation where if you don't get any progress whatsoever, or if your progress is so small, then there is pretty much no point in continuing because, well, you've got nothing but negatives. It's all negative, and it's sort of just it sort of just sucks, I guess, in a sense. in a way of putting it. It sucks a lot. If you, if you, if I feel like I'm not making progress, if I feel like I'm not doing like another big thing, I'm afraid that I'll meet a negative reception, or people will sort of think that I'm doing nothing, and so I proceed to sort of shut down. This is also the exact same when it comes to more physical senses of consequence. For example, I really don't like fucking with a lot of things that you can take apart, even though I do like taking them apart and putting them back together. There is a bunch of fear that comes from mixing up the screws, from not remembering how exactly I put it together, and thus I fuck it up, botch it, maybe even completely destroy the thing that I'm trying to rebuild or remake. It's a massive mess for me. There's so many different ways I can portray consequence, but in a sense, it's just a reaction to my actions, and either like just a negative reaction in some way from other people, or a negative reaction from myself in some way. I count as a consequence, or at least a negative consequence of my actions. And admittedly, I'm not very fond of them, like at all. I'd go as far to say I absolutely hate them. Hence why they're a fear. I fear getting it. It legitimately inspires a form of dread within myself. If I fuck it up, what's the point? That type of thing. A sort of nihilistic idea, I guess, is a way of putting it. It definitely stems from a form of nihilism. I can say that very confidently. The next facet of it that I want to cover: how exactly do I handle it? It's pretty difficult to handle this one. It's one of those ones where you can only hope to distract yourself, but even then, especially when it comes to physical consequence, there's no guarantee that it'll work at all. So you're kind of just stuck. You're stuck just doing nothing and letting it fade away. Letting yourself just sit there and hope that it disappears within at least maybe a day or two, and at most, with a big hope of at most, of a week, because these can linger for quite a long time, especially when you live with the people that you do, and they don't shut the fuck up, so you're stuck lingering on all of your issues for way longer than you should. It's, yeah. I, as a sort of issue with myself, I linger on things for way too long, especially small things that legitimately don't matter when you should just keep fucking moving. So it kind of makes a lot of these wait for it to fade away situations way worse, because even with distractions, when you're not being distracted, you're thinking about it, and you kind of have to be. You kind of can't be distracted to sleep. I know. I know I've said that I use sometimes just sounds to fall asleep, but it's more I just need them in the background, especially since I can't really handle the tinnitus ring in one of my ears, so having a sound, even just droning on a little bit, kind of helps me fall asleep. It lets my brain sort of focus on something that's not the ringing, and it becomes immediately less annoying. But the other downside is when you aren't being distracted, even with something in the background, you, well, you can't help but focus on all of your flaws. Especially with a fucked up sleep schedule like mine, I end up falling asleep well after midnight, which is the witching hour, and the perfect moment for me to reflect and think about all of my issues. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but either way, the fade away sense of dealing with something really isn't healthy, in my opinion. Especially since, for the most part, when I do dwell on them, they are almost certainly negative. Sometimes they're positive, but almost always are they negative, which isn't exactly the most mentally healthy approach to your issues. But that aside, and tangent aside, the next one would be, where does it stem from? I mean, I alluded to it. We do kind of live in a system where taking responsibility for your actions is never encouraged. Kind of just easy to see the world around you as if you don't take responsibility, you'll probably be better off, even though if you did, you might actually learn something and be better, but it doesn't really matter. It is a sort of, in a sense, I guess, an institutional thing, in quotes, or more of a systematic thing. We just kind of live in a, or I just kind of live in a fucking place and time where you're encouraged not to take responsibility. You're encouraged to shift the blame to anyone you can and constantly distract from your own issues instead of actually doing something about your own issues. Um, there's also definitely a sense of fear of consequence that my parents would constantly drone into me, which is really fucking annoying, actually, because I shouldn't necessarily be scared of consequence. At least I've come to the conclusion that I shouldn't be scared of consequence. But I've also come to the conclusion that my parents did a pretty shit job of raising me. Actually, they didn't really do the job. They just kept me alive, and that's it. So maybe I shouldn't be giving them any credit for that. But they would consist. The one consistent thing they did was if they didn't like something, they'd make sure that I knew it. And my dad and my mom didn't shy away from verbal and physical abuse in the sense. They definitely could have toned it down a little bit. I think they I think maybe one of them realizes that, but I don't see them self-reflecting anytime soon, so I'm not even going to bother looking into that. Either way, they were adamant in teaching me not to do that and making the consequences suck. So, you know, since you're a kid, you make links and observations, you sort of tie things to certain feelings. So, consequences are something to be dreaded, especially when you don't want to feel pain, either either like mental or physical. It doesn't really matter. So I kind of just made the association, and here I am now talking about it into a fucking laptop. Uh, and then ideas for how to. I know I remember the last one. It's ideas for how I could confront this and make it not nearly as bad of a fear, or at the very least, exterminate the fear, because I don't feel like or I don't feel like I, at least, should fear consequence. It's just a natural thing. It is what it is. And I don't really know. I really don't. One could be desensitizing myself to consequence in general, which I don't really see working too well, but who knows? It could. I don't really have a clue. It very much could work. I'm not sure. I'd have to test that out. Um, Another would just be, again, time. Just sort of let time pass. I will grow wiser, and honestly, the number one killer of fear, in my opinion, is wisdom. So that might be a very valuable. That might be a very valuable, or not valuable. Valuable's not the way of putting it. A very viable way of going about things. Even though it sucks because I can't, like, confront it and do something about it now, there is a level of comfort in that it will happen eventually. I will be liberated of my fears eventually, which is very nice. It always a very nice thought. Uh, oof. But I really am not sure as to what I should do when it comes to confronting something like this. Like I said, maybe exposure therapy, maybe experiencing consequences a lot more will sort of not desensitize me, but rather maybe expose that consequences in and of themselves aren't necessarily bad. But I don't know. I'm really not sure. Maybe after this I'll gain another revelation, and maybe it'd be worth it to put it in like description or comment it down below for me to see later, because why not? But as of right now, I don't really have too many ideas on how I can confront this. I guess the best way to do would be talking. Just, hey, look at that. I'm doing that now. But I really don't see much of what I myself can do as of right now. I just don't really see anything as of right now. I just said that 3 different ways. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I guess that's it. I don't really have any other thing to talk about. I suppose I'll see myself next time.